experience from wherever we've been before this. And we want to make sure that everyone feels comfortable to share. If you feel like you have something to add or you have a question, I hope you feel comfortable to raise your hand or speak out if you would like to, because I'm not the only expert. Abby is not the only expert. We are all people that come with shared experiences and different experiences, and we would love to hear from everyone. And also, who knows who Brene Brown is? So Brene Brown is a social worker researcher, and she's written a number of amazing books. And in one of them, she talks about how at the beginning of their meetings, they do permission slips. And so what that means is giving ourselves permission to be human. And I can give you an example. So today I give myself permission to make mistakes. I may say the wrong thing. I may mix up words sometimes. I may almost get maybe some tears in my eyes if I'm really tired and I'm talking about something that I care about. So you don't have to say your permission slips out loud, but I would like everyone to feel comfortable to take care of themselves. Give yourself permission to step outside. If any of the material that we talk about today feels triggering or difficult to you, for you, then please feel free to step out. If you are stepping out and you need support, Abby is happy to help if you feel like you need someone to talk to. And if you just need to have time by yourself, that's okay. But please reach out if you do need support. And we support everyone doing what they need to do to take care of themselves. And thank you for being here. So I like to share this slide about the mental health continuum model and give everyone a reminder that we can't pour from an empty cup. And so just like when we're taking an airplane and TSA reminds us that we need to put on our own oxygen mask first, it's important that while we all may be very well-intended and have desire to help people, we have to make sure that we're first mindful of our own bandwidth and taking care of ourselves so that we can effectively take care of others. And there's no shame and nothing to feel bad about if you need to take time or space for yourself so that you can recharge before you help others. So I like to have everyone just take a look at this health continuum model. And again, you don't have to say anything out loud, but if you can notice and think about where you might be on this continuum, you could be in the green zone where you feel like you have good sleep and you have good energy and you're able to be social. You might, and you're able to focus. Some of us might feel a little bit nervous because we didn't get enough sleep. We might have low energy. We might not feel super social. We maybe have a bucket over our head, so to speak. And so there are things that we can do at the bottom to help us get back into the green zone. And if we're feeling injured or ill, so we want to make sure especially that we're taking the time to take care of ourselves before we're trying to take care of others. And so since we are all just coming in from out into the world and we all have had our days, whatever we were doing all day might have been difficult, might have been stressful, I would like to give everyone an opportunity to do one of our movement meditations. Has anyone done a movement meditation before? I don't know why my sounds aren't on. Maybe it's not going to work. It was on.
Power off. Power on.
So this is
successful.
Something that we're going to do. We're going to just move our body in any kind of way and shake. And the reason that we do this is to reset our nervous system, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Our speaker's not working, but at least you can kind of hear it. So this is the time where you might feel a little silly. It's okay to stand next to a chair. If you feel like you need some balance, you can do it while you're sitting down if you feel more comfortable, but if you're able to, stand up and just shake off whatever stress you had during the day. It might feel silly and goofy, and I promise we're all doing it. It's okay to be silly and goofy, and it's all okay for our inner child. And so just shake. Yeah, the dog wants to shake. You can shake from your hands. If you're sitting in your seat, you could do something like this to try to kind of generate some energy. It gets the circulation going, and it can shift how we're feeling in our bodies. You could also stretch a little bit. Sometimes if you're standing on one foot and you want to kind of imagine your feet are glued to the floor, but you're stretching out in a different direction. So this is just going to help us get out whatever we had going on before we entered this room and help us be present so that we can focus on what we're doing today. Also, I encourage everyone to try this trick whenever you're having a hard day because it can really shift your mood. It can also give you a little boost of energy if you're not feeling very energized. So thank you for humoring me there. So as we see here, we break up physical tension and any mental rumination, things that we keep thinking about. It helps us if we've been through a lot of trauma and we feel like we're stuck in kind of a frozen state. And it also helps us be more aware of our emotions and how our bodies are having expression. And so if we had more time, I would have us move more and then have a little bit of stillness and silence, but I'd like to, in the interest of time, I'm going to let us keep going onward. So who would like to share with me what is trauma? Anyone?
PTSD.
Okay, go ahead.
I said PTSD.
PTSD is a type of trauma or a disorder you could have if you're experiencing trauma, yeah?
And I would say severe stress on the brain.
Severe stress on the brain. So severe stress on the brain, I think similar to what both of you are saying, thank you. When we go through something that's difficult and we do not feel that we had a resolution to that, it feels like something that's lingering in our body or our mind.
At the time.
Excuse me?
Maybe you didn't feel it at the time, and then like when you're out of the situation, it hits you.
Yeah, so maybe you have delayed processing. So you didn't feel like you were experiencing trauma in the moment during the experience, but later when you thought about it or you felt in your body, you felt like you were affected by that. And so trauma is the impact that's on our physical body and our mind from difficult experiences that might feel unresolved in our experiences. And has anyone heard of big T trauma or little T trauma? Yeah, I see Caitlin nodding. Would you like to share?
Okay, my understanding of it is like capital T trauma is like the things that anyone would say is trauma, you know, being abused and having something terrible happen to you. This little T trauma is like more, might be more complex trauma or smaller situations that build up over time.
Sure. So if you put in here, Caitlin, then the big T trauma or capital T trauma is going to be some trauma that we experienced that we physically maybe felt our life was in danger. It's things that you might associate with, you know, abuse or physical or sexual abuse. When our bodies and our minds feel the danger and we feel like our life is threatened, that's a big T trauma. An example could be a car accident. It could be, excuse me?
Like war.
Like experiencing war. It could be abuse if you were on the receiving end of abuse. And little T trauma would be something that is maybe a stressful experience, but not necessarily life-threatening. An example could be moving, changing jobs, going through a breakup, losing a pet. So, you know, it may feel impactful to us, even though our life is not in any immediate danger, but it still impacts us. And so I like to mention that there's big T trauma, but also little T trauma. And what impacts one person is relative, and it may or may not impact another person. And trauma is relative. So it's not, like I like to say, it's not the trauma Olympics. We're not in a contest to see who had the worst trauma or what's the most impactful trauma. Anyone experiencing any sort of situation that they felt left a lasting impact on them or felt unresolved to them could be traumatic. And I'd like to show a brief little clip about trauma and the brain.
The brain develops from the bottom up. The first thing to develop is the brainstem, or the reptilian brain as some people might call it. This area is responsible for our bodily functions. It tells us when to regulate our temperature, when to sleep, and when to eat. The next important part of our brains to develop is the limbic system, or what some people might call the mammalian part of the brain. The limbic system supports a variety of functions including emotion, behavior, motivation, and long-term memory. The next part of the brain to develop is the cortex, which is the outer layer of the brain. This is sometimes considered the human part because humans are one of the only mammals that develop this part of the brain. This part of the brain is responsible for how we as humans were able to develop language, have thoughts, self-awareness, perception, and consciousness. Also, the cortex plays a key role in integrating the central nervous system and functions of memory. The last and most advanced part of the brain to develop is the prefrontal cortex, which is considered the executive functioning part of the brain. For some people, this part doesn't fully develop until they're in their mid to late 20s. The prefrontal cortex helps us to think through cause and effect, the ability to plan for the future, set goals, and understand the consequences of our actions. It's also responsible for the ability to moderate social behavior. When we're in a stressful situation, part of our limbic system called the amygdala sets off an alarm bell response to let us know we're in danger and we need to do something about it. When this happens, the brain floods with a hormone called cortisol, so the body knows that something needs to be done. The most common responses to a stressful or dangerous situation are some you might be familiar with: fight, flight, freeze, or submit. This is an inbuilt system of survival to keep us safe when we're in danger. Like when our ancestors might have had to decide whether to stand their ground and fight against a large predator or run away. A stress response is a healthy, normal part of being a human. It lets us know that our bodies are working and keeping us safe. If a person is exposed to a highly stressful or traumatic event, or they have continual exposure to stressful events like abuse or neglect, their alarm system might become overactive. It might be always switched on, as if there was a risk of danger or threat at all times. For a child, this might affect how their brain develops. This is especially the case if it's in the context of stress or trauma events by a primary caregiver. In these cases, the child might develop an understanding of the world as an unsafe and dangerous place, even when they are in a safe situation. Sometimes this is called hypervigilance. It means being on edge or aware of danger at all times. Being exposed to stressful and traumatic events on a regular basis can also have a significant impact on neural connections in the memory center. It can even change the way we remember actual events. People use alcohol and other drugs for a variety of reasons. When someone's experienced trauma, they might be in a constant state of fight or flight, and so might use substances to help move them out of their stress response state. We also know that substance use can affect the way that our brain functions. Chemicals from substances cross the blood-brain barrier and can either stimulate or depress different parts of the central nervous system, affecting how the person feels, thinks, and acts. Similar to cortisol flooding the brain in the stress response, chemicals from alcohol and other drugs can also affect neural pathways and the way the person might make decisions or remember events. Luckily, neural pathways have the lifelong ability to form and change. You might have heard this referred to as neural plasticity. Through developing a better understanding of the brain and the way trauma and alcohol and other drugs affect neural pathways, clients can be better informed and empowered. This is an intervention itself called psychoeducation.
Okay, so I like to use what I call the hand model of the brain when we're talking about what we just saw. So if we're thinking about the brain stem, that's going to be right around our wrist area. It connects to our spinal cord, which is like my arm. And then next would be the limbic system. And that's in here, how we process emotions, how we store memories. If we have a really intense emotion, it's going to help us remember something. Or in the case of trauma, it may help us, it may block it out to protect us. And that happens, and that's through the limbic system. And then the cortex, the mammalian part of the brain, is the stuff that, helps us do a lot of other things. And then the prefrontal cortex is what I like to call the front of the lid. And that gives us all of our executive functioning, our ability to plan for the future, to problem solve, to understand the consequences of actions. And if we go through any kind of experience that activates our fight or flight or makes us feel triggered, we do what I call flipping our lid, which means now we're not getting access to our prefrontal cortex. We're not able to plan for the future. We're not able to problem solve, and we may be acting more emotionally. Can anyone relate to that feeling sometimes? If we're feeling really anxious or scared, it may make it really hard for us to think rationally about something. And so imagine if we're making decisions or trying to function like that for any ongoing period of time, it might really affect our choices. And so what we talk about also is that there is a very large nerve that connects from the brainstem all the way through the spinal cord to all of our major organ systems. Does anyone know what that nerve is called?
Is it the vagus nerve?
Yeah, the vagus nerve, which is a Latin word for wandering, is the origin of that name. So the vagus nerve wanders through our entire body and connects to our heart, to our lungs. It sends messages to tell our body whether we need to be hyper aroused, meaning that we need to have energy to run away or to fight, or if it goes to hypoarousal, meaning that we shut down. We might freeze or submit or people please because we want to make sure that we're mitigating any other kinds of stress. And ideally, we want that vagus nerve to be sending messages when we're in a situation like this setting that we are in the window of tolerance. We're able to be present, we can feel connected and be social with other people. If any of us have any issues with anxiety, we might feel like we're a little bit in the hyperarousal at the top. We might feel nervous about speaking in front of others, or we might feel stressed about something else that happened in our personal life or that happened earlier today. Or we may just be so overstimulated or so overwhelmed from whatever else is going on in our personal life that we feel numb and shut down, and it makes it hard for us to connect with others. So I think this is really important to pay attention to because we want to be aware of our own window of tolerance and notice when we kind of feel that water rising within us, because then it doesn't take very much, right, for us to flip our lid. And especially if we're helping others or we're working in a helping profession, we want to make sure that we're able to approach that from a place of logic and reason and planning and being able to problem solve, and recognize that when we flip our lid or we feel hyper or hypoarousal, that we're able to step back and take care of ourselves so that we can get back into that window of tolerance. And that's ideally where we want to be with interacting with others. I think we've all been through a global pandemic and a lot of other stressors in our lives, and I think many people still don't understand the gravity of the consequences of what that event over the past several years has done to our bodies and our minds. So I think it's really important to be aware of this. And also regarding that vagus nerve, again, coming back to how it connects to the different organ systems in our bodies. If we are going into the sympathetic, the fight or flight on the right-hand side where you see the green organs, the vagus nerve is going to send messages to each part of our body to tell it to do things to prepare us so that in case we need to run away or we need to fight or argue and defend ourselves, that we're going to have our pupils wide. So we're going to be able to take in as much light as we need to. Our blood flow is going to go less from our hands and our feet because we don't need to do fine motor skills, and more into our major muscles so that we can run or fight. It's going to relax our airways so that we can make sure to get enough oxygen. It's going to increase our heartbeat so that we can fuel whatever we need to do. And it's going to shut down our stomach and our digestive system as well as our reproductive system. It's going to mean that if you had eaten a big meal and then you got really stressed, you might have a stomach ache because you're not processing that food the way that you're supposed to. And so if someone's having a chronic state of anxiety or fight or flight, they may notice that their hands are always cold because their blood flow is constantly going away from their hands. Or their pupils may be dilated and they're getting a lot of headaches because we live in the desert. And if you're taking in a lot of sunshine and it's already really bright, that's going to give you a headache. And you could have a stomach ache. And so for people that have been through a lot of trauma, it's really common to hear similar complaints of physical ailments like headaches, stomach aches. However, you could go through a battery of medical testing and there's nothing physically actually wrong with your body. It's just a matter of the state that your body is in having a consequence on stopping the way that it would function if it was in that window of tolerance. And then when we are in our rest and digest phase, which is the window of tolerance, that green zone, we're gonna have our pupils constricted. We're gonna have our saliva producing so that we can digest food from the start as soon as we put it into our mouths. Our heartbeat will be slower, our airways will be constricted, and all of our digestion and reproductive systems will be functioning. And so we can imagine if somebody is consistently in fight or flight, that they may have a lot more complaints of issues that are happening. And I think it's really, really common, especially working with people that have been through war or trauma in their traumatic dislocation before coming to the United States. So trauma affects not only the body, but also, of course, our mind. It can impact our memory and our concentration, how we take in information and how we're able to focus. If we're in a fight or flight mode, we're not gonna, and we flipped our lid, we're not accessing, all of our problem solving and our ability to focus. We're gonna be maybe having our memory remember things differently, just like it said in the video. And people who have been through a lot of trauma are more likely to have physical ailments that are detrimental to their health later in life, like heart disease, addiction, lung disease, diabetes, autoimmune disorders, where the immune system is then attacking healthy cells in the body, cancer, and obesity. And so it's understandable then if someone is going through a lot of trauma, they might have difficulty trusting others, and that might affect how they're relating to other people and their ability to have healthy relationships with people they care about. We all kind of have that friend or that person that may kind of fly into a panic or a chaos over seemingly small changes, and that may be because their threshold for stress is very low because of the repeated stress that they're experiencing and how frequently their body is in fight or flight mode. And so when that's happening, that's going to also impact our own abilities to perceive ourselves. And if we're ruminating and thinking about things and we're focusing on negative or hurtful or harmful things, it might prevent us from being able to soothe ourselves and keep ourselves into that window of tolerance in the green zone. And that then can change how we feel and believe about our own selves. And it can really impact someone's ability to hope or dream for the future. And that's, I think, the most sad part for me is considering that if someone is experiencing so much stress over their life or experiencing a lot of trauma, then they may lose hope that anything is ever going to be better because all their body and mind remember are stressful experiences. And so that might change. If I feel that way, I might look at Julie's face right now, and even though she has a neutral expression, I might perceive her to be angry at me, or I might perceive her to be upset, even though she may not be that way. My perception is more hypervigilant because it's trying to keep me safe, right? So all of these responses and reactions are our body's attempt to keep us safe. So if someone is perpetually threatened, they feel like they're in survival mode all the time, we wire to fire to wire, right? So our brain is making these pathways, and then it has, just like when you sled down a hill on a sled and you take the same path over and over again, it kind of gets pushed down into the snow, and then it's hard to deviate from that path if you want to steer or go a different direction, because it's ready to go the same path and the momentum is going to keep you in that same zone. And so it's difficult then to behave differently if that's how our body is used to processing or our mind is used to processing. And so essentially that means that we don't have immediate choice over how we feel or think, because our body is in overdrive handling that based on our vagus nerve and our sympathetic nervous system. And so, just like I said, when we flip our lid, we're losing the ability to perform executive functions like reflection, evaluation, and we might not, someone may have a really great logical argument about why something should be a certain way, but we are adamantly opposed to it because we have a core visceral feeling and we're not accessing our rational thought, right? So for people that have had excessive trauma or repeated complex trauma over their lives, it may take less for that threshold to tip them into the fight or flight zone of hyperarousal. They may feel or display anger or acting out, or they may shy away and withdraw from the group and not want to be around other people because it feels safer to be alone because other people are unpredictable or loud or triggering or anxiety inducing, and it feels safer to be by ourselves at home if we're feeling hypervigilance. And as the video said, some people choose substances because they feel like their body is stuck in that way of being reactive, and that maybe a system depressant like alcohol may be one of the ways that they use to cope with that feeling to help their body come back down into a state of rest and digest. And I think it's really important to notice that a lot of times these behaviors get mislabeled as mental illness, when really in fact it's just someone experiencing fight or flight or experiencing survival mode. And I think many of us, if we feel like our life is threatened in our body, we may behave differently than we like to show up on a regular basis every day. And it would be easy for someone to label that as a condition or a pathology. But it's important to remember that maladaptive behavior is maybe someone's pattern of trying to stay safe, and maybe that served a purpose for them in the past, and maybe their physical body and brain don't understand or know in that moment that this is a safe situation and they don't need to be in that red alert zone. And so it's important for us to remember that trauma changes the body, and it's important for us to regulate our own selves, and that if we're struggling, we can reach out for support and to build relationships and help each other feel safe and validated and heard. That's basically a human need that everyone has, to feel safe, validated, and heard. So what is re-traumatization? Does someone know what that means?
Maybe there's been a long period of no trauma, but when something's triggered in your brain or somebody says something, brings something up, it causes like that re-traumatization.
Yeah.
Your body, your thinking, and everything.
Yeah, so you might re-experience that. If someone had PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder, they may feel physically like they're in that space or time or place of where the trauma occurred in the past. Their body may feel that danger. I've worked with people from different countries that have literally felt like they were back in their country of origin, and when they looked around, they didn't see Americans and friends. They saw soldiers and rebels and other people that were trying to hurt them because their brain was convinced in that moment that they were in danger. And so we want to avoid, as helping professionals, as volunteers, we want to avoid re-traumatizing people, because we know that if someone is in fight or flight, they're not activated, they're not able to actualize and use their executive functioning skills, then we're going to have difficulty engaging with them and helping them even understand what's happening or remembering what's happening. So we want to avoid re-traumatizing someone. So if we were working in a clinical setting, we would make sure that we are explaining, if you're ever advocating for someone at a doctor's office, you know, some doctors do a great job of saying, okay, is it okay for me to touch you before they touch you? Or they may ask and explain what's going to happen before doing something. Whereas in the emergency room, somebody might just be all doing things at the same time. They've got a blood pressure cuff on you, they're trying to take your temperature, maybe they don't have time to explain what's happening, and that could be really re-traumatizing to someone because a lot of things are happening at the same moment, and they may not feel in control of their body or being able to understand what's even going on. And so we want to avoid doing things too quickly. We want to avoid taking away choice. If at all possible, we can give people choice. You know, you can choose between using your crayons and coloring on these papers. You can choose between using a fidget. We give options because that's one of the main things that we try to offer at Owl and Panther. We also want to make sure that people are not having trust get broken. I think a lot of times, and one of the biggest ways that Americans can cause harm or damage to new Americans and people who are adapting to life in the United States, is to make a promise or tell someone that they'll do something and then not do it. And now that person may feel like they can't trust any American because I'm not even going to try bothering, because if that person let me down, then everybody's going to let me down, right? And so it's really important to be mindful of what we're offering to do and to make sure that we're offering to do things with people and not for people, and that we're paying attention to what we're promising and making sure it's appropriate. We also want to make sure, so not doing things for someone. Has anyone ever worked with small children and you see them and you want to help work with something and it's really hard to not just do it for them because it takes 10 times longer?
Teach a man to fish kind of thing?
Yeah, but then the little toddler's like, no, I do it. And they really want to show you that they can do it, and it's going to take 20 minutes longer, and it's really hard to be patient. And that's how they learn. That's how they learn that they're capable. That's how they build confidence. And the same is true for adults. We want to do things with people, not for them. So if someone is a new American and they maybe don't feel super confident with English yet, it might be really quick and easy to fill out a form on their behalf without doing it with them. And it may feel like that's really helpful. However, if the person's not having an opportunity to be involved and to learn those steps, it may just elevate you in a status of power over them, where they feel like they are now a recipient of your support instead of helping to empower them to feel like they can be involved and do the same thing. Also, asking people to continuously retell their story. If anyone has ever been with a friend who went through sexual assault, there's like the reason most people don't report sexual assault, because telling the story over and over again is re-traumatizing. And if you do report sexual assault, you will have to tell your story again and again and again to multiple police officers, to multiple people in court settings. And that can just be so re-traumatizing that many people don't want to go through that. And so we want to avoid asking intrusive questions about someone else, even though we may be curious and genuinely have a positive intention for why we want to know more about someone's story. That might be re-traumatizing to have them mentally go back into their story and think where their body was in that moment, and it makes them feel viscerally like they're going through the trauma again. We also want to avoid labeling people. So if they do have any diagnoses, we want to use person-first language. We want to say that someone is experiencing a mental health crisis, not that someone is psychotic, for example. And again, we want to make sure that we're collaborating and giving opportunities for feedback. So in contrast to what harms, what helps are trauma-informed approaches, which include choice, include offering a safe space where people feel like they can relax and their nervous system can be in that rest and digest phase. We want to empower people to use the skills that they have and build upon those. We want to build trustworthiness. We want to say what we mean and mean what we say. We want to give as much information as we can to help everyone feel like they understand what's going on. We want to have appropriate boundaries that also maintain trustworthiness and be consistent. So if I'm working with a family and Abby's working with a family, we both want to be saying the same messaging, especially as an organization like Owl and Panther. We want to be consistent in what we're saying because that's going to impact how someone feels they can trust us. Again, we want to be involved in shared decision making. Here's an example of shared decision making at the beginning of every year. We work with our Tuesday night group to make brave space agreements. Similar to safe space agreements, this takes it a little bit further. If we feel safe, then we can step up and be a bit brave. So we ask our participants to help us make some agreements or ground rules for how we'll behave when we're in a setting together. And by involving the youth in writing them and choosing what we put on this list, they're collaborating and they're having agency, and we're empowering them to be involved in this process. So that is helping them feel more safe and feel like they can participate in a way that allows them to show up as their full self. So in participating in Owl and Panther, there was a report by the Bureau of Applied Anthropology at the University of Arizona that talked about the impact of using these trauma-informed approaches and the way that Owl and Panther interacts with participants. And in the short term, it helps, a lot of people. If you look around this room, we have people from all over the world. We have people with different experiences and cultural backgrounds. And it gives us a chance to collaborate and work with other people from a multitude of experiences. And it also helps us build and acquire skills and express ourselves through different expressive art options or mediums. And it also helps us work on our critical thinking skills. And as we do this over time, it's going to help us build our own confidence, helps us have more empathy for others, helps us notice and be self-aware if, maybe I said something and I didn't like how that felt in my body when I said that. So I'm going to make sure that I make amends and apologize because it's important to me to correct how that was. And at Owl and Panther, we're really big on that personal accountability, understanding that we're all human, we're gonna make mistakes. I make mistakes all the time, and that's how I learn. And what matters more is not that I don't ever make mistakes, but how I handle those mistakes and how I make amends and repair. And so we're also, as volunteers and staff members, we model persistence at hard tasks. Some of us may feel like we are not good artists, or we might feel like we don't feel confident in our writing skills, and it's okay. So if we're all doing it at the same time, we're encouraging each other to do that and allowing ourselves to just show up however it is with our skill level and wherever we're at. We're also going to have more knowledge of the Tucson community, as Owl and Panther likes to do a lot of activities with community partners out in community spaces. We want new Americans to feel like they belong in those spaces, and so many of our experiences happen in this room. We have programmed the first night in 2 weeks in this room, but then we also go out into the community at the Tucson Museum of Art, the Tucson Village Farm, Rock Solid, Mount Lemon, all over the place. And that helps people feel like they're more of a part of the Tucson community. And so again, all of these things in the long term help to make people feel like a sustained part of the community, helps to build resilience, and helps to promote awareness and understanding for refugees and immigrants and the contributions that refugees have and immigrants have in our society. Everyone has, I think there's only enough for maybe every other person, since many of us work in refugee work. This is an old handout from the International Rescue Committee, but it does address a lot of myths. And if you've not worked with immigrants before, I encourage you to take the copy on the table home with you and give a look over to dispel any myths that you might have had from just not knowing. We don't know sometimes what we don't know, we don't know. So it's important to remind ourselves that trauma changes the body, we can regulate ourselves, reach out and build relationships, and make others feel safe, validated, and heard. And one of the things that we utilize at Owl and Panther are mind-body skills. There are a multitude of different approaches to mind-body skills. Does anyone recognize any on this list that they personally practice at home or feel comfortable sharing about?
I do affirmations.
Sorry?
I do affirmations. I used to make the kids do it, my kids, and I noticed when my kid was like in second grade, and he didn't study for his spelling test. He wrote on the back of it, "I will ace my spelling test."
Yeah.
Which is kind of funny, but
Can you share what an affirmation means?
affirmation is when you want to, I guess, you speak what you would like as if it's in the present tense. Like, I am healthy and strong. Even if you're not feeling particularly healthy and strong. Or, in my kid's case, I aced my spelling test, even if you didn't study for the spelling test. But it's a thing. It's visualization time.
Yeah. And I know
So
our
his
brain
doesn't start, but-
our brains are listening, and how we talk to ourselves matters. And how many people talk really kindly and speak really kindly to a friend, but are a little bit harsher on themselves?
Yeah, you can't use negatives when you do affirmations,
Right.
right? Because the body will, of the secret.
Yeah,
right?
so if I'm having a hard day and I'm like, oh, this always happens, it never goes my way, and I feel really discouraged, that is going to be in my brain believes that that's true, and then that's going to be fulfilled. I'm going to perpetually do things and behave in a way that reinforces that
So
belief.
even if you feel bad, just try and say it, or I guess it's especially powerful if you even look in the mirror and say it, or write it down.
Yes, very true. So writing it down also accesses another part of your brain that helps you remember it. Using the motor skills of your hand, the kinetic movement is going to also help your memory, and speaking in the positive tense. And I think for some people, affirmations may feel disingenuine if,
It kind of does.
Yeah,
But it's kind of the point.
It might feel disingenuous to say, I'm gonna ace my test if you didn't study. And you could also say, I'm doing the best I can and I'm getting better every day. You can find other ways to say affirmations that do feel authentic and genuine, because if you don't take it seriously, then you're not really gonna pay attention to or believe it. So it's important to find an affirmation that works for you. Breath work, I found personally, is a really powerful tool. How we breathe can cue how our vagus nerve is sending messages to our body. So we can change how our body feels and what state our body is in that hyper or hypoarousal based on how we're controlling our breathing. Because imagine if you're trying to run away, you maybe breathe more heavily and quickly. And so if you breathe that way, your brain may feel more stress and may feel more danger. But if you breathe in a more slow and relaxed way, especially when your breath has a longer exhale than the inhale, that signals to your body that you're safe and everything is okay, and it's gonna help you more. So there are a lot of different approaches, but the main idea is that we wanna connect what's happening in our bodies and what's happening in our minds. Many times I like to say that I feel like my brain might be a little bit of an untethered balloon, like my thoughts are drifting far away from where my physical body is. I might be thinking about what I need to do tomorrow. I might not be present in the moment. And it's really helpful to have some mind-body skills, or maybe I do a shake, or I do look in the mirror and have affirmations, something that reminds my brain and my body that they're both in the same place at the same time. And it helps me maintain more of a regulated state. For many people, spirituality, a belief in a higher power, whatever that may be, helps to process difficult things. And I think that it's a wonderful thing for anyone to be able to draw upon in whatever way works for them. Owl and Panther doesn't endorse or condone any specific religion as being greater than another. We just support everyone honoring their spiritual practice in whatever way is appropriate for them. So using breath work is gonna engage our parasympathetic nervous system. That makes us feel more relaxed and grounded and creates a sense of safety in the body. And then when we're doing movement meditation, that can also help to break up the tension in our bodies and give us a little bit of energy if we've been feeling run down. How many people get that kind of like slump of energy in the afternoon, maybe around 2 o'clock, and you feel like you just really need a nap or to lay down? I feel like that. It's like I've taken in too much stimuli, there's too much going on now, and what I often find is I don't really actually need sleep. What I need is to lay down horizontally and allow my circulation to move through the whole body, right? Or I just need to do a grounding exercise to feel present, or do like a quick cathartic shake that rejuvenates my body and gives me more energy and gets me out of my head that's keeping me in a sluggish state. And so we encourage breath work. There was a breathing exercise, but I don't think we have a ton of time to do it, but I do want to just encourage anyone who hasn't tried breath work to practice. Much like when you watch a baby breathing, their bellies get bigger when they breathe in, unlike a lot of people trying to adhere to Western beauty standards of trying to like inhale and suck in our stomach as much as we can and take up, especially if you're a woman, take up as little space as possible. That's counterproductive and counterintuitive to the way that our bodies naturally want to breathe. So you relax your stomach, allow it to get bigger as you're taking in an inhale, and you expand your chest, and you can feel your diaphragm moving up to allow more space in your rib cage. And when that happens, and you hold the breath in for a little bit and then let it out very slowly, that's going to activate the parasympathetic nervous system to be in a rest and digest state. And so sometimes you could do, we can send in the email an activity or a breathing exercise that Owl and Panther has recorded, and I encourage everyone to try it whenever you feel stressed out or you just need to bring your nervous system back into that zone of the window of tolerance. So it's about an hour in. I'd like to give everyone a chance to take a bio break if you need to, just for a few minutes. If you feel like you need to step out and use the restroom, if you feel like everything is going all right and you want to keep going, I can do that as well. But again, take care of yourselves and your bodies if you need to. We have snacks too, so feel free to help yourself. And if we need more water, there's a filter on the sink. We can fill up that pitcher again.
It's still full.
Yeah, that one has liquid IV in it.
Oh,
It's just electrolytes, so
oh, it does, that's one I gave.
hydrate. It's
Was
good
that
for you.
water or liquid IV water? Sorry.
Hmm? And if it, oh, go ahead. Were you gonna say something? No. If anyone's curious, there is a comic, I hope it's in the right order, but along the back wall, there's a digital comic book that a former Owl and Panther cohort made to talk about Owl and Panther, the origins. I think there might be a little bit about the origin story of some refugee experiences. And there's a board that shows some photos from our Afghan health promotion program. We also have some trifold brochures if you want to see more about Owl and Panther again. Awesome. Let me pull it up.
Okay.
So, Avi, do you want to talk about Owl and Panther first and then boundaries? Or do you want to talk about boundaries first? Jackie is talking about boundaries. So I'll switch with you if that's good. You need a fidget? Okay. Oh, and if anyone does want to try the breath work, this actually changes color for green. You inhale as long as it's green, you hold your breath as long as it's pink, and then you breathe out slowly. Oh,
I don't know until then.
I'm gonna wait.
First thing I had to do for my job
after,
is what I
after,
did.
and then for blue, you exhale.
Really? 22 years ago.
So you try to breathe in for 4 seconds, hold it for 7 seconds, and then breathe out slowly over 8
So
seconds.
back in Amy Sugar's
And that
class.
stimulates your parasympathetic nervous system.
Yeah, thank you.